Guys, welcome back to another geography lesson, and today we're going to continue with the question paper and we're going to look at question number 4. Keep in mind, once again, only answer 3 questions. There's 2 questions in section A and 2 questions out of section B, but you're only allowed to answer 3 questions. But let's continue looking at question number 4, beg your pardon. Now question 4, first question 4.1 refers to the settlement hierarchy in figure 4.1 below that shows the classification of different types of settlements. Now let's just quickly have a look. What is a settlement? It's where people live. Now if you look at this figure, over there, the smallest settlement is an isolated farmstead, and we did discuss it in the previous lesson when you look at Constantia, that map of Cape Town. It's basically like a farm. It's where the family and the workers live. That's your smallest type of settlement. And the hamlet, second smallest, a village. Now, we can classify these 3 settlements over here as rural settlements. And what is rural settlements? It's usually when it's unifunctional. Unifunctional with only one activity taking place. In this case, mostly primary activities taking place in the settlements. If you look at the small town, city, large cities and conurbations, that's our urban settlements. As you can see, urban settlements usually multifunctional, more activities taking place, for instance, secondary and tertiary activities, and especially in your large cities, we have quaternary activities also taking place. But pay attention next to this figure. As you can see, the size of the population, it's tiny where the farmstead is. A conurbation is huge. More than a million people living over there. And if you look at the number of settlements, isolated farmsteads, there will be more of this type of settlements, especially in rural areas. And the conurbation, for instance, is only 1 in the whole of South Africa. But let's go and have a look at the questions. Our first question. The isolated farmhouse is a single or a multiple building. Now, isolated farmhouse is going to be a single building. That's the correct answer. It's usually just the owner and his family live over there and his workers as well. 4.1.2. The number of settlements increase or decrease as you move up to the settlement hierarchy from the isolated farmstead to the conurbation. And the correct answer is decrease. And the answer is given to you on the figure, as you can see over there. You can see that how bigger the settlement, the number of the settlement is decreasing when you move in that direction. If you continue to question 4.1.3, the size of the population increase or decrease as you move down the settlement hierarchy from a conurbation. Now obviously 4.1.3's correct answer is going to be decrease. There's not a lot of people living on an isolated farmstead. And once again, if you go back to your figure, you can see that's the size of population, amount of people living there. It's decreasing when you move to rural settlements such as the isolated farmstead, and increasing when you move to conurbations where there's a lot of people living over there because of more economic activities taking place. And let's quickly have a look at our next question. The settlement hierarchy in figure 4.1 is a South African example of a settlement hierarchy as the largest or smallest of all the settlements is not included. And the correct answer over there is the largest. Okay. 4.1.6, the only example of a conurbation in South Africa is found in the PWV, or Durban Pinetown Industrial Region, and the correct answer is PWV. Now remember, PWV stands for Pretoria Witwatersrand and Vereniging. Now, if you can remember, when we look at the theory, that's our 4 industrial hubs. Now, the PWV is the biggest, second largest is the Durban Pinetown, third largest is the Southwestern Cape District, and lastly is the Port Elizabeth Uitenhage area. Now, the relationship between the size of the population and the number of settlements is it directly or indirectly proportional? It's indirectly. Because if you look at it, go back to the diagram over here, what do we see? If the size of the population increases, there's less settlements. If the size of the population decreases, there's more number of settlements. And that's the correct answer for question 4.1.7. Now, the hamlet or the small town is an example of a rural settlement. I've indicated on the figure over there, if you can look over there, the village, hamlet, and an isolated farmstead is being classified as rural settlements, like when we looked at our theory notes. So a town will be seen as an urban settlement because it's got more than one function than the hamlet. So the correct answer over there will be a hamlet. Okay, let's continue with our questions. 4.2. Various options are given as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the answer and write only the letter next to the question number. So let's quickly have a look at it. So it's multiple choice that's being asked over here. Which one of the following economic activities is associated with the tertiary sector? Now, there's your key word. Now, mining is definitely primary, as well as forestry, as well as agriculture. It's raw material. So a tertiary activity over there that provides a service is retail. So the correct answer over there is C. Now, retail is shopping, for example, like Edgar's, Foschini, or Pick n Pay. That's a tertiary activity. It's a service being delivered to the population. If we quickly continue with our next question, industries, and that's your keyword over here, that are service orientated are known as footloose industries. Now, raw materials orientated is industries that rely on the raw materials, and the market orientated industries is where they sell the product. And the bridge industry is where different transport routes meet. 4.2.3. The clustering of economic activities that are similar and rely on each other is referred to A, agglomeration. Centralization is where all the businesses are close together, for instance, in the CBD. Decentralization is when businesses move away from the CBD. Designated areas that do not have traditional trade barriers are called free trade zones. Now, if you look at it, have no traditional trade barriers, so it means trade can take place continuously and freely, and that is known as free trade zones. So the correct answer over here is B. A special development initiative is, for instance, we developed areas where people don't need to move away from the areas, so basically we need to stop rural-urban migration. 4.2.5, the sector of the economy that's not regulated and registered for taxes. Now, they don't pay tax, they don't add to the GDP, And we discussed this quite a bit, and that's the informal sector. The formal sector is registered with tax to pay tax. Tertiary is service delivery. Primary activities is basically farming, mining and fishing, but the informal sector, like your spaza shops and people selling stuff next to the road, they don't pay tax. Now 4.2.6, intensive farming for local and export markets is also called commercial farming. Now, very importantly over there's your keyword situated over there. For the exports market, it's to make a profit. So what we basically do is we take our product, we farm it over here, we produce it over here, and what do? We ship it overseas to earn foreign income. For instance, our grape farming taking place, the processing taking place is making wine of it, and eventually shipped it out. So commercial farming is always to make a profit. Now, if you look at subsistence farming, it's only to farm for yourself. Livestock farming is usually animals, and small-scale farming is also for yourself, with a different types of farming activity taking place at once. The provision of electricity is A, B, C, or D. Now, the provision, now it's basically a service. And as we know, to deliver a service is a tertiary activity. For instance, A, farming, B, processing and manufacturing. Tertiary is a service delivery, and quaternary is research. Okay, and that's your correct answer for 4.2.7. Let's quickly go and have a look at our longer questions. Okay, 4.3. Refer to figure 4.3, which shows an informal settlement. As you can see, once again, these questions are going to discuss the difference between the informal sector and the informal settlement. Please, grade 12s, don't get confused between the two concepts. Okay. In 2005, an estimated 934 million people lived in informal settlements in developing countries. Now, this number is going to increase to 1.5 by the year 2020 and to 2 billion by 2031. Now, as you can see, it's not only a problem that we experience locally, but also internationally. Now, this stands out for me. Developing countries. Developing countries are countries that still focus on raw materials and not on processing and industrial development. And if you look at the informal settlements, we do quite have a lot of it because of the rural-urban migration that we experience and because of the unemployment rate. But let's go and have a look at the questions that follow. Please pay attention. If you look at these informal settlements, they do look different from one country to another. But one thing that they all have in mind, they lack basic needs and services, and they lack infrastructure. That's a key component of informal settlements. Informal settlements are known by different names throughout the world. Give an example of one such name. Now, in South Africa, we call them squatter camps. And in other countries, we call them basties. Okay, that's a familiar name in South Africa, squatter camps. State the trend in the development of informal settlements. Now, what's happening with the trend over here? It's definitely an increasing trend. If you go back to the figure and with the information provided, you can see that 2005 it was 934 million, but over 15 years' time it's going to grow up to 1.5 billion people. So it means it's an increasing trend, it's increasing over the years, and it's quite concerning actually. If we look at our next question, give one reason for the trend mentioned in question 4.3.2, and the correct answers over there is because of the rural urban migration, and we will probably discuss it in the next question. And there's not enough housing in urban areas. So immediately it's a chain reaction. There's a huge influx of people moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. And then because of the urban areas developed or the infrastructure already been planned, it means there's not enough housing for the people moving from the rural to the urban areas. If we quickly look at 4.3.4, excluding the trend stated in question 4.3.2, discuss any two problems associated with informal settlements. Now, these informal settlements can pop up overnight. So there's two problems that can arise from it. And the first is poor infrastructure. There's no outlay of the settlement, so the people just build their houses. And the biggest is poor services. Now, like I've mentioned, if you look at the definition of an informal settlement, it's a settlement that lacks basic needs and services. So it's poor service delivery, such as inadequate housing, inadequate housing, can add over there, overcrowding, too many people living together in a small infrastructure, and we can mention over here, high crime rate, and we can also throw in over here, pollution problems. Pollution levels will increase because not enough services to remove the pollution, and we can experience social problems. Okay, stay tuned and we continue after the break with question 4.3.5. See you in a bit.